it's not likely to redevelop into a tropical cyclone. Near gale force winds, heavy rain and flooding are expected in the Gulf country, with severe weather warnings in place.
Meanwhile, the Bureau says the chance of a third cyclone forming off Queensland this season has risen from 10 to 15% over the past 24 hours. The system could develop into a cyclone as early as next Tuesday, but thankfully, the threat to Queensland is still low. Let's bring in Emma with the latest. So what do we know about this, Emma?
OK, so we're going to start with ex-tropical Cyclone Kirrily because that's where the warnings are at the moment. At the moment, it's just not going anywhere. It's still sitting in the Gulf waters just north of Burketown. It's expected to do that U-turn later today and head south. So we do have warnings for the Gulf country spreading across the Queensland border into the northeast of the Northern Territory. Now, we did have a warning for the North Tropical Coast, but that has been cancelled. So over the Gulf, the Bureau is warning of heavy rainfall, 24-hour totals of between 150 and 250 millimetres. But there could be isolated falls of 300 millimetres. That means, of course, the risk of flash flooding. Damaging winds are also forecast, averaging up to 70 kilometres an hour on the coastal fringe. Now, already Mornington Island has recorded wind gusts of more than 100 kilometres an hour. It's also had more than 100 millimetres of rain since 9 a.m. yesterday. We have flood warnings and flood watches in those areas and in other parts of Queensland too after that heavier rain earlier in the week. So what happens next tonight and over the weekend? Ex-tropical Cyclone Kirrily is heading south. Now that means further rain through Western Queensland and that means associated flooding. The system will track over the western districts of Queensland, eventually moving down through southwest into northern New South Wales. That will happen by early next week. As it will move, though, it will start to lose moisture and energy. The Bureau is also keeping an eye on this weak low in the Coral Sea. Now, at the moment, it's a subtropical low. It's moving northeast away from the coast, pretty much outside the Australia region. But what it does next is what we're looking at. There's a 10 to 15% chance that it'll develop into a tropical cyclone next week. Now, that is still very low. It could still be outside of Australia's region when that happens. And there's a really large area where it could spread. There's also a possibility that it'll move west back towards the Queensland coast by late next week. But some modelling suggests that it could continue to move further away, further across the Pacific. So a lot to keep across. We will be keeping on top of that over coming days, team. And of course, as always, keep across those warnings if you're in any of those areas in the Gulf country.